Hey, it's Eric Arnold here in the politics barn, secondary studio here on this Black Monday, the 13th of February. Well, I saw an interesting article here on Zero Hedge, and I thought, you know what, this is something I'd like to share in its entirety because I think it's significant. It's regarding the Twitter hearings that are going on in front of Jim Jordan's House Committee, basically batting these leftist, communist censocrats around now that the Republicans have a majority in the House of Representatives, so they can beat these guys up. They can't do anything other than yell at them. So it's really, for all intents and purposes, pointless. It's a propaganda exercise, and we're trying to get our message out now that these are the bad guys. These people that are being called to testify. They're evil. They are bad. So we're trying to get that message out. We can't do anything to them, of course, because the law enforcement machinery in this country is controlled by the communists. So all we can do is just go, "You're bad. See, you're bad." And of course, the media is also controlled by the communists. So basically, it's getting no traction at all. But you know, I thought for the few people that watch this channel, it might be fun to read what was written here. Now, this is a long. Pretty long, but I'll try to read fast. How about that? It's written by a person named Dr. Naomi Wolf, who is a Democrat. You know, I can pretty much ascertain that just by reading her writing, looking at her bio. Wikipedia these days, remember, Wikipedia is controlled by the same people that used to control Twitter, that still control Google, YouTube, Facebook. Twitter left it, twits, that's what I meant to say. Little children, highly overeducated little children, amoral little children that have no conscience, that think they're brilliant, but are actually really pretty stupid. And that's who controls Wikipedia these days. So you gotta really kind of read hard to find just basic facts amongst all the propaganda and lies that's on Wikipedia. So, but going through her Wikipedia page, Dr. Naomi Wolf is a feminist. Apparently that's her issue, is that women's rights. She's been firmly, her whole life, in the camp of the Democrats. She advised, I believe she was a paid advisor on the 96 Bill Clinton campaign, that she was also perhaps paid, perhaps unpaid, unofficial advisor to Al Gore in the year 2000. She's basically a writer. Frankly, looking at her bio and her writing, she seems almost like a left-wing Ann Coulter, a little bit. But she's written numerous books, one of which, I guess, the New York Times declared one of the 70 most influential books in the 20th century. I believe that was called The Beauty Myth, basically saying that society expects women to look good, and this is detrimental to women. As far as that being a basic premise, I can go along with that. I mean, just because women might be physically ugly doesn't mean they're bad. Doesn't mean they're useless. And do we hold women to a higher standard than, say, an ugly guy? Yeah, probably. Is that fair? Probably not. So, I'd probably go along with her premise in that book. But at any rate, apparently over the last 15 years or so, Ms. Wolf has started to somewhat branch off the traditional communist orthodoxy. Apparently she's smart enough that she can think for herself in some fashion, in that, she started to branch into some things like, wow, maybe there is a secret government going on behind the scenes that doesn't have the people's interests at heart. She's known, I guess according to Wikipedia, a conspiracy theorist. What that means is somebody smart enough not to swallow hook, line, and sinker every piece of shit that the government throws out there for you to regurgitate. So she's smarter than that, apparently. And she was also smart enough to realize during the pandemic that the path the government was forcing us to go down was the wrong path. That she was anti-lockdown, anti-vaccination, etc., etc. Well, of course, she got canceled. So that's the point of this entire article, is that she got canceled, and here's all these Twitter idiots that are finally being hauled up before Congress to answer for their evil actions. And this is her article explaining what she thinks about that. So I want to share this with you. So here we go. This is Naomi Wolf, and apparently she's writing this as she's watching these hearings on C-SPAN. She's about 60 years old, I believe. Okay, and by about 60, I mean 60. So just so we can kind of get a picture of who Naomi Wolf is. As I type, I'm undergoing the excruciating experience of listening to C-SPAN, which is airing, quote, Twitter's response to Hunter Biden's laptop story. The larger issue is who censored Twitter and why, and whether there was a legal collusion, there was, between Twitter and the United States government. So I'm finally seeing them, up close, in real life, in person. I'm finally able to look at the faces of the heretofore faceless technocrats who took it upon themselves to try to destroy my life and ruin my name. I am witnessing as I see them seated primly in rows in a congressional hearing room, the very faces, the somber, ill-cut but costly blue suits, the bad wire-rimmed glasses, the judgmental expressions of those who were personally responsible for the misery, trauma, reputational damage, shattered dreams, and loss of income in my one life over the course of the last 2.5 years. Here at last are the very people who took it upon themselves or oversaw their colleagues to single me out, to collude with the White House, and with Carol Crawford of CDC, and with DHS perhaps, to suspend me, following an accurate tweet of mine that warned women of menstrual harms following the mRNA injection. The positions of these people, the views of them, their self-regarding, self-satisfied, smug certainty that their rightness is only rightness they could ever be, do not remind me of the testimony or views of actual Americans. They remind me rather of the effective functionaries in a Stalinist show trial, or the nameless bureaucrats in Kafka's The Trial. There, on screen, present at last, is Yoel Roth. Now, Yoel Roth is one of these little Twitter assholes who no longer is with Twitter, but he's one of the main people that was censoring people, one of the main censors. Former Twitter head of trust and safety, with that oddly prim-pursed mouth that these technocrats all seem to have, with those fingertips touching each other, presenting himself as if he is the moderator of reality itself, and as if he finds himself in the presence of something that smells bad. There are his glazed, defiant blue eyes, his slightly balding pate, the costly haircut. There he is, sneering, downward cast of his mouth. I try not to ever make critical personal remarks, but the ugliness, sorrow, loss, isolation, and pain I sustained, and still ugliness of their decisions, as manifested in their faces and their body language. Sorry, not sorry. Yeah, good for you, Ms. Wolf. She continues. There he is, Mr. Roth, quote, there he is, Mr. Roth, wrongly claiming that paradoxically, more speech equals more danger, and not more safety for society. There he is, the person so sure he's so right, having tweeted that Republicans are Nazis. Roth did that. Roth had, when Trump was elected, he tweeted out that there were actual Nazis in the White House now. So, you know, in other words, Trump, Nazi, actual Nazi, you know, Z Kyle, you know. And that's the stupidity of the Twitter people who Musk is ousting, the people that were censoring everybody. That's the stupidity of the people being hauled before Congress now. All right, back to Ms. Wolf. And here he is, sorry about that tweet now. That is, now that he's being asked about it by those same Republicans. There's Annika Collier-Navaroli, former U.S. safety policy team senior expert, talking about dangerous speech. There's her pale gray jacket, her earnest if not bullying posture, as she leans forward, passionately describing the terrifying nature of freedom of speech. She describes a Twitter policy to address coded incitement to violence and to address dog whistles. Overt threats of violence, of course, are already illegal, and they are the province of law enforcement, not social media functionaries. Yet based on these coded tweets, rather than on actual threats of violence, Ms. Navaroli calls for more censorship. Thus, she's already staking out and defending the Orwellian province of thought crimes, or pre-crime. It was never Ms. Navaroli's role to decide if dog whistles, quote-unquote, dog whistles, would lead to violence. That's the role of the police and the FBI. Why is she claiming that a social media platform is supposed to take on the role of maintaining physical public safety that belongs to law enforcement? Ms. Navaroli ends her hectoring introductory preparation with a pious, condescending conclusion that her mission is to make communication online safe. Her evidence of crimes committed by speaking on Twitter include this 1984 level sentence. The president said he liked to send out his tweets like little missiles. I assume she's referring about Trump. And to me, that sounded like weaponization of a platform. Has this woman never taken an English class or learned about metaphors? Still later in the hearing, she accuses fan fiction, quote-unquote, fan fiction of leading directly to the murder of people on January 6th, putting herself right in line with the many despots and tyrants who, since the birth of the novel, have accused the act of reading of causing social mayhem. There's Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton, that's I believe the representative from the District of Columbia, a leader whom I used to greatly respect, fulminating about conspiracies. I keep doing this because Naomi Wolf keeps using quote-unquotes in her writing here. Anyway, there's Eleanor Holmes Norton, a leader who I'm used to greatly respect, fulminating about conspiracies. There she is using the dangerous language of incitement, a meaningless word that only serves to criminalize First Amendment protected speech. There's Representative Summer Lee, that's a Democrat from Pennsylvania, on her first week in the job, alarmingly, wrongly stating that it's her task to protect the American people from misinformation, a role for a member of Congress that is identified literally nowhere in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. Correct. There's Twitter former counsel and former head of legal policy and trust at Twitter, Ms. Vijay Gadde, with her slightly more polished look and her sapphire-colored jacket, a package that proves, however, only the pure evil can be as well-dressed and coiffed as not. Pure evil for Gadde there, pure evil like that. There Ms. Gadde is, prevaricating when Representative Nancy Mace, Republican from South Carolina, asked her directly if Twitter ever censored Americans pursuant to the demands from the government. After Ms. Gadde's mumbled gibberish in response, haplessly phrased in the passive voice, Representative Mace thanked Ms. Gadde for admitting that Twitter had become a subsidiary of the FBI in illegally violating the First Amendment rights of Americans. It's so painful for me to see these faces. I have a very intimate relationship with these people. They tried to destroy me, and did a fair job of it by some measures. These are the people, my people, paradoxically, people educated like me, people who shared my political views until 2020. These are people who vacation where I used to vacation, who hang out with people I know, who are the agents behind full-on Stalinist-type persecution of innocent Americans, of me. These are people who ruined my life or sought to do so, destroyed my career or sought to do so. These emotionally ugly, these nasty, self-satisfied folks, so sure they are right, so very, very wrong, at last, right here on C-SPAN. They persecuted not just me, but Dr. Moulton Kuhldorff, Dr. J. Bhattacharya, Dr. Paul Alexander, Dr. Peter McCulloch, so many others. They scrubbed and manipulated the discourse of a platform that had no right to be any more censorious than a telecom company, because they were willing to collude illegally with the government to decide what could be said in America. The messaging from the FBI via the super-secret James Bond teleportal, as Representative Jim Jordan so brilliantly and rightly put it, reached into the voices of Americans and strangled Americans' rights. But Twitter and the company's political friends went further than mere silencing. These smarmy people ultimately hurt and may have helped to injure and kill many thousands. Let me read that again. These smarmy people ultimately hurt and may have helped to injure and kill many thousands. True, true, true. These are the people who decided to remove the accurate tweet of mine about menstrual symptoms subsequent to the mRNA vaccines that could have saved millions of women of the current agony and infertility they now endure. These are the people who obeyed the instructions of their colleagues in government to censor me. I looked at the bios of the people CC'd on Twitter communications with the White House attacking my accurate tweet. There were a lot of young functionaries at the U.S. Bureau of Census, at least two of them, oddly educated at the University of Delaware. These low-level Gen Z arapachiks and their incompetently articulate bosses thought it was fine to censor the career and try to shed the reputation of someone who had written 8 international bestsellers, who's been a Rhodes Scholar, and an advisor to a presidential campaign and to a vice president, who had gone back to school at midlife and had worked for 7 years successfully to complete a Doctor of Philosophy at Oxford University, who'd been invited onto every major platform and written for every major newspaper and was a commentator on every major news network for 35 years, and who, for those decades, by those same platforms and news sites, had been identified as a global leader in the feminist movement. That's Ms. Wolf describing her resume. These nothing people in front of me, these hacks, these people of zero cognitive distinction, these essentially trivial-minded humans, use their unearned, thug-like, intellectually meaningless power, the intellectually two-dimensional power of a social media platform, to announce to the world I was crazy, unhinged, to present what appears to have been a file to the BBC, to the NPR, to the New York Times, to my own former colleagues, seeking to represent me, a lifelong writer of heavily annotated best-selling nonfiction, as not credible. For 2 years subsequent to my deplatforming, news outlets, including those which I used to be a columnist, such as The Guardian and the Sunday Times of London, did not need to claim, let alone prove that I was actually wrong in any concrete way. All they had to do now, and they did this repeatedly, clearly as we see now at the behest of the government involved, was to repeat the phrase replicated around the world and embedded into posterity via my Wikipedia bio. Naomi Wolf was banned for Twitter for misinformation. Misinformation is never in quotes. The accurate caveat, quote, what Twitter calls misinformation is never added. In spite of this being the it is never added in spite of this being the journalistically ethic and correct phrasing. In other words, misinformation in quotes, that means somebody's calling it misinformation. When you just say, without quotes, misinformation, well, that means it's misinformation. Nobody disagrees with that. That's what she's saying. At any rate, back to Ms. Wolf. This damning but really meaningless summary, then, is to what 35 years of labor, a status as a feminist leader, 2 degrees, 8 bestsellers, thousands of footnotes, and the publication of essays in every major news site in North America as well as most of Western Europe got reduced. Naomi Wolf was banned from Twitter for misinformation. That's what she's been reduced to. Back to her. It is incredible to me, as someone who's raised in an American meritocracy, and who until very recently believed in the American meritocracy, that a group of non-entities in Twitter, in collusion with non-entities at CDC, Carol Crawford, the White House, and the U.S. Department of Census, were able thus so simply, and at such an immediate nuclear scale, to destroy the reputation of someone identified since 1990 as a major American voice. So, this can happen to any American voice. Yeah, fucking A there, Ms. Wolf, absolutely. These ill-dressed, ill-spoken, banal career ciphers cost me so much. I retrained for almost a decade in the middle of my life to teach. It's all I ever really wanted to do with my life. Now I'll never be able to do the only thing I ever wanted to be, a professor of English literature at a university. I'm now 60. It's too late for me. Twitter, in collusion with the Biden administration, cost me my hard-won lifelong dream. I've been maligned and censored by Twitter since 2021. Even if the company eventually settles my lawsuit against it, and even though Mr. Musk has let me back on the platform, this is no victory. Twitter has not sent an advisory to all the news outlets around the world that depicted me, at Twitter's own direction, as crazy, that they were wrong to have done so. There's been no press release stating that they erred and that I was right, and that they're sorry for wrongly abusing my reputation and for destroying women and babies. No, forever I will remain deplatformed for Twitter misinformation in the cybersphere, even though it's finally being established that, sadly, I was deplatformed for telling God's honest truth. It is unlikely that any university at this point would see past the grotesque imprint on my bio that Twitter, via the White House, CDC, and perhaps the FBI, has taken care to embed in my bio and in articles about me around the world. It is unlikely, too, that I will ever recoup the six-figure investments that investors withdrew from my company when Twitter, colluding with the government, was orchestrating the shredding of my reputation. It's unlikely that a 35-year career and legacy online of what has been seen until very recently as a life of significant accomplishment can ever be reestablished. I try never to complain in public. I try never to show self-pity or weakness, at least not to my enemies. But Twitter's attacks on me are not over, and I'm simply sick of the damage these mediocrities have done to me and continue to do so. Just yesterday, LinkedIn sent me a notification that a Twitter political staffer was viewing my bio. A notice of scrutiny by a Twitter staffer with friends in the administration reached my inbox the day before congressional hearings about censorship both entities imposed on people such as me. Intimidate much, Twitter? I'm a brave person, I guess, and I won't be daunted by this obvious effort at harassment. But I'm also human, and I happen to have a broken shoulder at the moment, and I'm simply tired. Tired of fighting these monsters. And yes, it's wearying and threatening and coercive to see that this massive behemoth with their friends at the highest levels of government are not done messing with my own personal, only life. Yoel Roth, to this very minute, defending the deplatforming of people due to having... let me start that one again. Yoel Roth is, to this very minute, defending the deplatforming of people due to their having spread COVID misinformation. That, dear reader, would be me. To this day, this trimly styled non-entity defends debunked magical thinking. To which Representative Majority Taylor Greene rightly responded, Mr. Roth, who put you in charge of what is true and what is not? Representative Taylor Greene also said to Mr. Roth, you abused the power of big tech to censor Americans. I am so glad you are censored now and that you have lost your jobs. I could not believe that my own people, my former tribe on the elite left, Naomi Wolf, Democrat, elite left, my former tribe on the elite left are joining forces with the government to violate the First Amendment rights of all Americans, and then worse still, to justify having done so. I can't believe that Democrat after Democrat, liberal after liberal, is on C-SPAN singing the praises of censorship and inventing imaginary roles for government officials and social media platforms to keep Americans safe from threats of discourse and ideas. We used to be on the side of Hal and Lady Chatterley's lover, of the well of loneliness, heck, of the free speech movement. What happened to us? She's referring to Democrats, to highly educated liberal Democrats. That's what she's referring to. I can't believe that people thought I was hostile to America's interests. In this case, the Republicans demanding answers from the hacks and flunkies of big tech are the allies, in this hearing's case at least, of the truth and the Constitution of freedom of speech. She can't believe she's on the same side as Republicans. And I can't believe that the forces who tore my life apart temporarily half destroyed my business and in any hopes of realizing one of my life's best dreams and set a match to my reputation turn out now that the curtain's been pulled back as at the end of The Wizard of Oz to be such small, sad, petty, miserable, mediocre people. The larger issue here is not the damage these smirking, small-minded people did to me. The larger issue is the experience I underwent at these hands represents for our culture. There's a specific kind of damage that Twitter and the Biden administration did in censoring and smearing the medical doctors, in silencing the signatories of the Great Barrington Declaration. The Great Barrington Declaration was a treatise, I don't know how to pronounce that, a memo, a writing, a article signed by countless doctors and public health officials that basically said, lockdowns are terrible, mandates are stupid, just let this virus run its course, that's the best course of action. And the government squashed it, trashed it, threw it in the can, 86'd it, deplatformed, canceled anybody involved with it. Alright, back to her. Medical harms, medical damage, limits to medical opinions. Medical harms and medical damage, limits to medical options, and open debate follow. But consider my example as an example of something else that's equally serious. I am not a medical doctor or a public health official. I am, or I was, an American writer, identified as a cultural figure. So what happened to me means that any American cultural figure can be taken down. Any American cultural movement can be misframed, deframed, broken. Any American writer, musician, artist, sculptor, actor, director can be annihilated and memory hold. Any American artistic movement can be burned alive. And remember, Twitter is an international company and wars can be waged culturally against us by our adversaries. Why should any young writer watching what happened to me believe in meritocracy in American culture anymore? Why should she work hard, aspire largely, and master her craft? Clearly keeping her head down and parroting the party line will keep her safer. So this issue brings us squarely into the cultural climate of 1933, when books were dragged from university libraries to be burned in a pile in Berlin, or of 1937, when the Nazi Party curated and hosted a degenerate art exhibit in Munich. What happened to me brings us squarely into a climate in which specific American writers, artists, sculptors, musicians, social activists can be identified as enemies of the state, or identified as culturally or socially untouchable. Degeneracy in 1937 was defined essentially as that which the Nazi Party did not approve. Today on C-SPAN, we heard a lot about the decision to violate Americans' rights based simply on sentiments of what the Biden administration or Twitter employees did not approve. The larger issue is that once a society crosses this Rubicon with one cultural figure, this can happen to any cultural figure or any cultural movement. And if we do not reject and indeed prosecute and legislate against this unlawful suppression of views at the behest of the government, then we no longer live in an American culture in which ideas rise and gain currency on the basis of merit and on the basis of ideas appeal to others. We will rather be in a Nazi reality in which petty officials distort and dictate culture itself, reputationally behead those cultural leaders who pose challenges to the power structure. Berlin, Munich, in this respect, are here again, in their darkest sense. Those who decided based on a party line on proper and improper art, books, and views are not dead and gone, lost in history. No, here they are. But this time they appear in our America, in their bad blue suits, with their pompous nasal voices saying, "I have no knowledge of this matter," or "I can't hear the question," as they occupy with their damaged consciences, their nauseating excuses, seatings in a hearing room on Capitol Hill in the United States of America. Dr. Naomi Wolf. So, I found that fun just because these people are evil that she's referring to. These little twitty Generation Z, amoral, evil bastards that are overeducated twits, as I call them. All education and no practical experience. They don't really have any idea what the real world's about. They don't have no sense of right and wrong. Now, perhaps sadly, maybe they do, and they're just simply not how should I say is ignorant. They're just evil. That's possible too, where perhaps that is what they want to do. Exactly what they say. They want to control everything so they have the power and you don't. That would be evil. So, what I find interesting about this, Dr. Naomi Wolf, what she doesn't say here, she's laying out her grievances, her well-founded grievances against these bastards, and I feel bad for her that she went through this. We all have. Anybody that's spoken out at all on any of these media platforms. I've been censored twice on YouTube for no reason other than accurately presenting information. We've all had to put up with this. What I find interesting is that she doesn't say that, oh, and by the way, I'm voting Republican in 24. That's the solution to what she's describing here. It's her people that have done this. Her people are the ones that are turning evil. Those are the ones that are espousing true evil. So it's possible that people on my side of the aisle call them traditional Democrats, old school liberals, where reasonable people can disagree about certain things, like how much money should we take from the people to run the government? How much money should we take from people that have jobs to support people that don't have jobs for whatever reason? That sort of thing. We can dispute those kind of issues and disagree as reasonable people. What you can't disagree about in a democracy, or the core foundation of a democracy, is freedom of speech, is the other side's right to respond to what I have to say. They get a chance to respond. I don't get to shut them up. That's not if I believe that, I don't believe in a free society. And it seems like she seems to grasp that issue. Now, I wonder if she grasped it before she was censored. You know, liberals are, some conservatives only became conservative. They were previously liberals until they got mugged. Remember that old saying that, you know, a lot of liberals become conservatives because suddenly they got mugged. And then I was like, oh, wow, you know what happened to me? The women's swimming team at the University of Pennsylvania, where suddenly now all these liberal women are busting their ass to achieve their swimming dreams, and here some dude decides he's going to declare himself a woman, and he's unbeatable because he's a dude, and they can't keep up, and now they're suddenly like, wait a minute, I know that this is part of our leftist orthodoxy, that we got to worship trans people and celebrate their courage, but this ain't fair. So yeah, there you go, more liberals that may inch just that more closely to reality, to being conservatives or Republicans. So she doesn't say that, and if the election was held tomorrow, I'm sure she'd vote Democrat. Yeah, that's where it's almost like, well, that's great and all, Ms. Wolf, but what's your solution to this? You know, thank you for telling the world what a lot of us already knew, that these Twitter assholes are evil as hell, that the people that run YouTube, Google, Facebook are evil motherfucking bastards. We knew this. So, you know, her solution is, you know, I don't know, she doesn't really present one. The obvious solution is vote Republican, Ms. Wolf. Get with the team. You know, I know that we're not on the side of feminism, probably, in the sense that you would see it, but we're on the side of free speech. We're on the side of we can have a discussion about these things. We don't shut up and ultimately imprison, which is where this is heading. You know, at a certain point, once things become certainly, you know, my example is the war, the coming war. Once this country's at war, it's not going to allow people to speak out against the war. They'll put people in prison for doing that. Call them traitors. Call them seditious. Lock them up. Long-standing historical precedent for this sort of thing. So that's going to happen. So and you say, well, they should have done that. I mean, you know, we can't have people running around World War II talking about how much they love Nazis and Japanese. And yeah, well, it shouldn't have happened. And furthermore, you should try to stay out of these wars that the government just can't wait to get involved in. But at any rate, you know, come over to the Republicans, Ms. Wolf. Come over to us. You know, let's try to get this country back. People just blindly following the government line, it's maddening. It's maddening. But, you know, it takes a lot to make people admit they're wrong. People would rather kill themselves than admit they're wrong. So that's a really tough hurdle to jump over. It's a really tough hurdle to get Democrats to come over to the other side. In other words, they're admitting they're wrong. Then, you know, you try not to make them actually say those words because, like I said, then they won't come over. I wasn't wrong. I was misinformed. I was whatever. Just we're glad you're here. You know, you don't have to allocute as to what you did. Just come over here. Just come over here. But we'll see. You know, I'm heartened by somebody like Naomi Wolf recognizing that it's her side of the aisle that did these evil things. So that's a good thing. Alright, that's all I got. I'm sure this ran extremely long. Eric Arnold here in the Politics Barn. I believe in free speech. Let's use it while we still can. Eventually it's going to go away. I'm a pessimist, not an optimist. But hey, let's use it as long as we can. We'll talk again.